see my face on the Zoom screen because our virtual speaker is coming in. Okay. Hi, Angela. Can you hear me?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Can you? So this is going to be your view of the room. It's going to be our three panelists, and it's a little bit trippy, but you'll see yourself like in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm just going to do a sound check right now. So if you don't mind just speaking, I'm going to see if our in-person panelists can hear you. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Can you all hear me? Hopefully it's not storming too bad where you're at. Can you hear me? Do I need to speak louder? Oh, now I can't hear you.
Do you want to try saying something to see if she can hear you?
It chops in and out.
Um, okay, give me 1 second.
Mhm.
I'm moving it closer. Okay. Um, see. All right, do you want to try speaking again?
Can you hear me now? Or
Yes.
okay.
Can
It's still choppy on my end.
ooh, okay, let's see. All right. Do you want to try speaking again? See if maybe this is better. Hi, Angela. Can you hear us?
That's much better. That's much better.
Hey.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So we'll be good to go. So at 6 o'clock, we'll actually start the panel discussion. So feel free to like hang out until then.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Okay. That was a little bit of a jump scare, but I'm glad that y'all.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Yes.
Or I guess if you're on.
Oh. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Because they will. See her. Yeah.
And
Yes.
so that's an interesting question about someone else. I don't know if that mic is like attached.
Oh. Let me see. I don't think so. I think they should just be hearing you guys and Angela. I think. Hold on. Let me actually test this. Okay.
Me and my partner are always on the same room, the same room. They are like. Maybe the one. I think they're only showing one on camera. My eyesight is not good enough. Yeah, I can't read it. I can see it blue, green, and red box. That's about it.
Yes. Primarily, it is going to be, I would say, undergraduate level students who have come to internship at different nonprofits and agencies. Some will be volunteers, but many are from our, I would say, coalition and like partner organizations and other AA and HPI serving organizations. Others are probably not professionals also seeking like community and network. That's kind of the fact there.
Oh, Angela, we're testing out the audio, so do you mind just kind of like talking and like speaking?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Does it work well? Is it blurry, fuzzy? Or
No,
do you Hmm?
it
Go
works.
ahead.
It works. Angel, is it good or do
Okay.
you hear an echo?
It's not too bad.
Okay, okay, good. So like when Angela talks, you don't hear an echo, Angel, or you're okay?
Wait, say something one more time.
Do you hear an echo when I talk? Is it echoing?
I think it's pretty minimal.
Okay, okay, so like it's okay. Okay, 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 perfect. That's it. Okay, I think we're good to go.
Okay.
Trying to hide it behind my name. Good, thank you.
Well, I got to go look at the. Okay, okay, awesome. Like I can see, I think you can open that.
That's Jesse. Great. I would say that.
Like for better for worse.
Yeah. We'll just roll with it.
Roll with it, yeah.
I've done these kinds of events for like attorneys and consultants. So I feel like, oh, this is a very laid back. I like to get through and talk for a bunch of. This will be a lot. Oh,
Finish it. It's like.
just not me.
We feel like killing for it on the video.
Especially with it being so warm today. I tried to hear before it started raining. It felt it. It was perfect. Here, because it started at 4:30. It started raining.
Oh, maybe
It's thunder.
I must have not been out there. Oh, you must have missed it. It must have been right before. Because if it's out. Very sucks. It was literally me just going on. Oh, that's okay. Like I forgot how to back it up. I always forget which. Like, they have a macro. Like above ground. It's like it's just one way. Not as like.
Basically, the silver line.
Yeah, just like this, yeah. And it's mainly to the airport and like down. But everywhere else. Typically, yeah.
Whatever reason.
Yeah, I put in like, if you wanna go to Silver Spring or Waldorf, but never been to many. But they don't have too much traffic. I still say bus like right here.
Well, I mean, you've been your front.
Like, I know. Angela.
No, but that's like.
That you
Yeah.
when I first. It wasn't that cheap.
Wait until somebody hears everything. And so.
Oh, wait.
I don't know why I'm We'll say much. It's like, so there's. So it was nice. Wait,
I'm missing the whole meeting.
Ready?
Oh, yeah. Wait.
All right.
Oh, wait.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Washington Leadership Program number 4. I'm Colby Keogh, CAPAL's Board Chair Emeritus. Bunch of fancy words to me, and I've been around for a little bit. We're so excited to have you here at the Washington English Center. This is our 4th session of the summer. It's not possible without all of you attending. We have a wonderful, really exciting panel tonight, and really important for this time. I want to thank our staff, Shama and Hannah, who pulled this all together. Also to Sarul and Angel, who are our CAPAL office interns, who you probably met walking in the door today, who are a critical part of our team. Tonight is all about mental health, and we have a really estimable panel that will talk us through that today. For those who don't know CAPAL, we've been around for 35 years. We just celebrated our 35th birthday in the fall, and we're all about cultivating leaders, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander leaders. The ways that we do that are a core public service internship and fellowship program. I should say internship and scholarship program, mentorship programs, and programs like tonight, our Washington Leadership Program, which is offered to the public. We welcome many of you from our partner and family organizations in the DMV, and tonight is one of those series. This program is pulled together by former intern alumni. So alumni of our program come together and think about what topics you all want to be thinking about and learning about. And so we're really pleased that alumni continue to be involved and I think prioritize or close to like what priorities matter today. For tonight's discussion, as I mentioned, we're going to be covering building career to burnout. It will revolve around burnout, finding strength, leaning on community, and how to take care of one's mental health. I think we can all agree, given the pace, the substance of current events, this topic is more important than ever. After, there's going to be an audience survey that we ask you all to fill out. It helps us, one, mark that you were here, but two, it gives us feedback to how we iterate this program going forward. We encourage everybody who's online and here today to follow us on our social media. We have a lot of platforms that put out great communication. Our interns are upping their game on the engagement piece. There's a lot of fun stories about what it's like to be a CAPAL intern and how to be engaged in our programs. I want to thank our speakers and panelists for taking time to be here. Crystal's only here for 3 days out of Denver, and she was able to take time to be here on our panel in person today. Thank you. And thank you, Angela, our moderator, who is going to be taking us through today remotely. I have to say thank you to Muapia, one of our main sponsors at the mayor's office that works in the AAPI community, Ben de Guzman, the director, who generously supports this program, and our host tonight, the Washington English Center. I want to welcome Jesse, who is our host tonight, to say a few words about the work that you all do here.
Thank you so much for giving me a little time to talk about Washington English Center. It's really a pleasure to host another impactful organization. Hearing what you said, I see a lot of similarities. We also work very closely with Moapia, and just a little bit younger than you. We were established in 1993, so coming up on our 35th year. So I just wanted to give a few minutes to tell you a little bit about what we do. We're Washington English Center. Our mission is to provide high-impact English language instruction to immigrants and refugees in the DC area and beyond, but primarily in the DC area. And we do that entirely through the support of dedicated volunteer teachers. Each term we serve around 700 students, from students who are just starting by learning the alphabet and basic, hi, how are you, what's your name, survival English, to students who are already extremely advanced, hold down jobs that require heavy use of English, but are still looking to fine-tune their skills and also find that community that we provide at Washington English Center. For us, it's not just about the classes, it's creating a space where people can make friends and feel connected and integrated into life. So we do lots of field trips and social events for our students, as well as focusing on the English instruction. And we really try to meet our students where they are. They're adults of all ages, from 18 to 88 plus. Our oldest student this term is in her 90s. We also have students from around 100 different countries each term, sometimes a little less, it depends on the term, and many different languages represented. So in one class, you might have 5 or 6 languages, and usually we have 40 to 50 languages amongst our students at any given time. And we also have both online and in-person classes in the morning and the evening. So online, we might have parents joining with young children on their laps who wouldn't be able to commute. And then in person, we have people who want the experience of physical classroom. And as far as volunteers go, our volunteers are also all ages from 18 to 88 plus. We have retirees, we have college students, we have young professionals, and we also have former WC students, alumni. We really value having both volunteers who grew up in the United States and can help students understand the country from the perspective of citizen. But we also really value having volunteers who know what it's like to learn English themselves and know what it's like to come here as an immigrant or to have immigrant parents. And so our student volunteers or former students do a great job encouraging others along their English language learning journey. If you're interested in becoming a volunteer, it is very easy. It's a 1-day-a-week commitment for our summer term, which is short and starting in July. It's just a 6-week commitment, 2 hours a day in class and then some prep time before class. We also have longer 11-week terms in the fall, winter, and spring. No prior teaching experience is provided. We provide training. We also have the support of a textbook with a teacher's guide and a co-teacher. We have a model where you're always with another teacher in the classroom. You can kind of divide and conquer the lesson planning and the actual teaching itself. And we try to pair our new teachers with teachers who taught before. We also offer the opportunity to observe our classes. And you just get to meet people from all over the world, really have a tangible impact, some experience in the United States. And on the last day of classes, which is actually tomorrow, students celebrate, they bring in food from their countries that they're passionate about, and it's just this amazing cultural exchange. So I do have some flyers if anyone is interested in learning more about volunteering, or if you know anyone who's interested in being a student. I'll just leave them on the table in case anyone wants to take any. Unfortunately, the only language we have the flyers in is Chinese or English, but staff are also very used to navigating, communicating with students from all different backgrounds. I could maybe take 1 or 2 questions, but I also want to be mindful of your time. Well, thank you again for letting me tell you a little bit about WC, and enjoy your conference.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jesse. We're going to make sure these flyers get to you all. I'm actually really personally interested. Thank you to Washington English Center. Thank you to Moapia. Thank you to our staff and our panel, and let's get to it. So over to Angela to kick off this panel.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. So before we get into the core discussion of it, since it is about mental health, I do want to do a quick activity with all of us just to kind of ground us from whatever stressors we're bringing into following the end of this day. So if you would all join me, I want you to, we're all going to do a little bit of a progressive like muscle relaxation activity. So I want you to ball up your fists for like 5 seconds and just kind of as you release, really try to pay attention to the sensation that flows through your arms or from your palms to your fingers as you release that. And then just do the same thing with your toes, curl your toes, feel that sensation, try to just bring us in the moment, the present. And then after we've done that, let's get started. So today we have with us our panelists. Thanks for joining. We have Crystal Canare, who is the Deputy Director of the National Asian American Pacific Islander Mental Health Association. And then we also have Dr. Christina Hong Huber, who is the licensed clinical psychologist for compassionate integrative therapy. And she's also a clinical professor of psychology at the George Washington University and an adjunct professor for the Chicago School. And lastly, we also have Wing Bui, who is the operations manager and lead clinician of Wellness with Wing. So if you would all just take a moment to introduce yourselves a little bit more.
Hi everyone, my name is Crystal Canare and my pronouns are she, her. A proud DMV native, proud Filipino American, no longer here in the DMV. I live in Denver, as Colby said, live in an RV. You want us to answer questions? This first question, Angela, or I can just say that I am a proud dog mom and just happy to be here. I will say that CAPAL, I think this program, this event actually is the reason why I got into the career I'm in right now. There was 11 years ago, a Washington leadership program on like mental health, and it was where I met somebody there that got me my first internship in mental health. So I just want to give that shout out before we get started.
Okay, well, hi everyone. My name is Christina Hong Huber. I am a licensed clinical psychologist based in DC. Angela gave a little spiel about me. I am a proud New Yorker DC transplant. I'm excited to be here with you all. And I guess we'll talk more later.
Hey y'all, my name is Wing. I'm Maryland born and raised. I'm a licensed clinical social worker based in Maryland and also licensed in DC. And yeah, I look forward to sharing more as we go along.
Perfect. So with your introductions, can you share a little bit of what you currently do within your role and also what led you to pursue that career in mental health and wellness?
Started. So as mentioned, I serve as Deputy Director at NAPIMA, the National Asian American Pacific Islander Mental Health Association. It was founded actually 25 years ago. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. And it was created through seed funding from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. At the time, there wasn't any national organization that would advocate for the mental health and well-being of NHPI communities. And so they created 4 different multi-ethnic behavioral health associations, NAPIMA being one of them. The way in which I got into the field, so NAPIMA does training, programs, and national advocacy. The way I got into the field, though, was through an internship with SAMHSA. Do folks know what SAMHSA is by any chance? Folks know the acronym? So it is the leading national federal agency on substance abuse and mental health. I get this answer all the time, this response, and it's actually pretty wild to me that everybody knows the CDC, the FDA, NIH, but not many people know about SAMHSA. And it's telling to me in terms of how much we know about like mental health, how much we talk about like substance use. And so when I was at the event at CAPAL, the person that was sitting in my seat right now was someone at SAMHSA. And I asked her just after the panel, like, what do you do? Like, I've never heard of this organization. And sure enough, she invited me to coffee and she ended up telling me that there was an internship there. They're based in Rockville. Again, they essentially provide grant funding to community-based organizations across the country to do mental health programming. And my organization, NAPIMA, was still one of those grantees. And so, yeah, that's how I got into the field. I was an intern at SAMHSA, did a couple of other internships with NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. After that, I was at National Council for Mental Wellbeing, which is the national kind of umbrella organization for community-based organizations across the country. And then I found track at NAPIMA, which I mentioned was doing specific culturally relevant training for NHPI communities. I do want to give a shout out to NAPIMA. Like if you want to do a mental health awareness training or a community program, those are free until October with our federal funding. So whether it's to do one with your organization or for you to just do it virtually online, those trainings help you learn how to talk to people about mental health challenges that they may be experiencing. So that's how I kind of got through into my field, and just really thanking for being that starter for me to learn about the systems that are supporting our mental health in our community.
Definitely don't have the advocacy background that Crystal has. I guess I have a little bit more of a straightforward academic trajectory. So I went to undergraduate, my studies were in neuroscience. So right after college, I was actually doing neuropsychophysiology. I don't know if anyone knows or cares. I was doing a lot of research around brain waves and like brain activity. Lo and behold, being stuck in a basement lab without any sunlight, really not good for one's mental health. I realized that was just not my cup of tea, but I really loved the patient direct services that I was doing and also teaching. So fast forward, I left my first doctoral program, entered into a PsyD program, which is a doctorate that really focuses more on producing like clinicians. So that's how I ended up getting my doctorate. While going through my different rotations, just keep it brief, there's three sort of different sections. There's counseling, social work, psychology. My background is in psychology. It is predominantly very white. I think about 80% of the psychology workforce is white. Of course, that's not very, representative of the folks that we worked with. So that's kind of how I got involved in really trying to find communities. I do a lot of peer consultation with, folks of color, especially a lot of fellow Asian American therapists. I also am a part of all these different organizations. One of the reasons why I'm here is to be able to give back to, folks, students. I think had I had more kind of awareness and insights into these kinds of spaces and organizations when I was younger, I think it might have, who knows how differently it would have changed my trajectory. I work with predominantly, I'd say about 70% or so of my caseload, the folks I work with are folks of color, and the majority of those folks happen to be of Asian descent. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about just the stigmatization of mental health and sort of all of these taboos and cultural myths, but it's been really a very, I think, healing and empowering opportunity for me as a psychologist to be able to talk about cultural, familial, intergenerational trauma. So not to be cheesy, but I mean, the work that I do, not only is it impactful for the client I'm working with, but it's really been a hugely, I think, empowering and really enlightening and healing opportunity for me as well.
So where to begin? My background is primarily in public health, and funny enough, so Angela, if I recall correctly, you work with the Asian American Health Initiative.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was actually one of my first jobs out of undergrad. I graduated from UMBC and started at AHI, which is located in Maryland. And there I was able to interact and engage a lot with the Asian, Pacific Islander community in Montgomery County, and learned that I wanted to pursue social work as well. So that's where I focused in grad school. A lot of my background is in community-based mental health. I've worked in some schools before as well, in Louisiana, actually, where there is a large Vietnamese population. And that just really grew more of my passion and heart work towards providing culturally like relevant and sensitive, you know, equitable and social justice focused mental health care. And after working in several different nonprofits, and going through grad school, I learned that there's so much red tape when it comes to working, I mean, really within any structure, right? Whether it's profit, nonprofit, and that especially when it comes to mental health care, there can be so many barriers that people encounter. And I just always had a feeling like I wanted to work for myself and like kind of make up my own roles. So that's where, you know, during the pandemic, I decided to start Wellness with Wing. And so currently that's my primary job. I am self-employed for the most part. I offer individual therapy to mostly queer people of color and adult children of immigrants, similarly to Christina, Dr. Christina. I also like to focus my work on addressing ancestral, intergenerational trauma and also attachment trauma, so traumas that occur early in life, in childhood. And yeah, I also like to engage in community, facilitating community groups. So I am trained in yoga and mindfulness and like to offer those across the DMV, and also just offering mental health consulting to different local groups as well.
Perfect. Thank you guys. You all have such amazing backgrounds, and it's great that we have like a diverse panel of backgrounds in advocacy to public health to private like direct practice. So that's great because then we can get so much input. So there's been a growing trend in recent years of openly talking about mental health. However, mental health is still very stigmatized in the AA and HPI community. So how do you approach this phenomenon through your work, and where do you think that this stigma comes from?
Yeah, you know, I'll share a little bit about, you know, the case. So, just like Wing, I'm very fortunate, you know, I have my own private practice, and I'll give a little bit of context. The majority of private practice owners you'll see in the, not just the DMV, but maybe, you know, all over the country, a lot of, you know, folks of color, a lot of therapists of color have private practices. Reason why? A lot of these group practices tend to not be the most conscientious, the most aware of some of these cultural, racial dynamics that, you know, come to play. So I can't speak for Wing, but from my experience, it was a really liberating experience to go out and be my own boss. One of the benefits of that is that it allows me to seek who I want to consult with. It allows me to be able to take on the kinds of folks I want to work with. As I said, the majority of folks I work with are folks with marginalized or intersecting marginalized identities. I myself am a child of immigrants, so I do also work with a lot of adult, children of immigrants. It's been really heartening because I have also worked with some families. Some, the parents, these parents might be like in their 60s or 70s, kind of working on some of these like ruptures, some of the family trauma that they have experienced with their adult children. So it's been really rewarding to be able to sort of talk about process, really sort of see how there's so much stigma. I want to say, I think in our, the Asian diaspora, it has been getting better. I think there's more information being disseminated around mental health and sort of the need for it. But I think being able to do some of the, what, if you want to call it direct service work, the clinical work, some of the, repair the ruptures, being able to heal from that in these therapy sessions have been so, it's just been so rewarding to be able to provide that. Once again, as cheesy as it is, to be able to see that to provide those opportunities. It's also like healing for the therapists themselves to be able to see that, because sometimes, you know, we have family members who may not be able to get to that space. So it's been, I think, really just wonderful to be able to kind of do, at least for me, do my part in being able to provide some more dissemination of information, be able to kind of break down some of these barriers, sort of like challenge some of these myths and these misconceptions around it. So my experience has been more so directly by working with folks. I can't speak to the advocacy piece of it, but at least for me, having seen in the past 5-10 years, I've seen so many more Asian Americans coming to therapy. I think if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would not have, you know, I probably would not be working with the number of Asian clients that I do now. So it's really been tremendous. There's obviously a lot more progress that needs to be done, but it's a good place to start.
To riff off of what you said, I like to refer to, I don't know if folks like watch Marvel and like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I always say like the NHPI mental health universe is expanding. Like there are way more organizations out here in the past 10 years that I've seen since like I started. And I just want to give a shout out to a few, like Asian Mental Health Collective is an organization. I was one of the founding board members, and during pandemic, they blew up. They created a Facebook group called Subtle Asian Mental Health. And it was a space online on Facebook for people to anonymously talk about their mental health experiences. And then there was also subsequent like Asian mental health professionals, where like mental health professionals, they're Asian therapists, and like came together and are like, hey, I need a referral for this, or hey, this is what I do. Like they advertise themselves on Mondays and like talk about their practices. And there's just been this growing, just like network of community that are now like connecting to each other for the first time. And so yeah, and then there's the Lotus Therapy Fund that is actually ending on Friday. It Asian Mental Health Collective offers free subsidized therapy for folks that are doing like trying to go into therapy for the first time. And they get 8 free sessions. They get connected to someone from their Asian therapist directory. And that has just blown up in terms of just like showing the need of people wanting to go to therapy for the first time, but also like the growing directory that's come out of it. And so I guess that's my answer to how do I approach this work? Just making sure that people are aware of the mental health resources that are out there, and acknowledging that there are many ways to support your mental health. Like there is therapy, there is like honoring non-Indigenous, like non-traditional Western ways of healing, and honoring like our Indigenous practices from our cultures. And so one phrase that we often have at NAPIMA is like, this too is mental health. Like taking care of like mindful eating and understanding like what it looks like to say like, have you eaten yet? Or how did you sleep? Those can be like opening questions you can ask your parents if they may not want to talk like directly about like maybe what's going on in their mind or in their spirit. And so we have a few trainings that have helped community organizations learn about talking about their full health in ways that may have been stigmatized in the past. And so just encourage folks to think about mental health in that more holistic way. And I think all of those, like, again, that mental health universe, all of those connections can really help people on their ways to healing, to thinking about mental health in ways that they think about them.
Yeah, and I think just adding on to the fact that there is more information that's out there, right? And the fact that CAPAL put this session together because of interest from the past participants, right, with this leadership program. I think that goes to show that having the space to have these conversations is so important, right? To not only like normalize, but also to recognize like we're not alone in the conversation, right? If we look around the room right now, we see others who might look like us, right? Or who might be going down similar trajectories as us. And I think that's part of the destigmatization of mental health, right? Is continuing to have the conversations and also to recognize that that our mental health isn't an experience that we have in isolation, right? That the more that we're able to open up and feel courageous and vulnerable in sharing beyond what people expect us to talk about, right? Like I'm not my job, right? Like I'm not my profession. I am a whole complex human being that has a mind, a body, a spirit, and how can I feel comfortable to begin to speak from those places, right? Those places that may not be seen or may not be as invited into spaces, and recognize that like all of me is important, right? And that I deserve to be like witnessed and seen in all of me, and that can be really hard. And again, that doesn't have to be done alone, right? And so I think something we'll get to more a little later is like the importance of care, right? And how does that happen in a collective way, right? And how do we begin to have those conversations of building that, right? If you don't already have kind of a community collective established. So
I thought I'd just add something really quickly to what Kristen was saying. And just another shout out for Asian Mental Health Collective, AMHC. But they also provide, besides the Lotus scholarships, they provide, and I've provided one of the free groups through it, but they have, I don't know, it's every twice a year, if it's quarterly, but they offer these different types of groups. It's not therapy groups per se, but it's especially, I think, when I offered my group, it was in the spring of 2020. So right at the beginning of COVID, and I'm sure you all can remember sort of all the anti-Asian hate and sentiment. It was really powerful to be able to just be in the space with other people who were just, grieving and reeling from the experiences. So in terms of just like working on lowering the stigma, I think just I'll echo what everyone else is saying, just being able to find spaces where you can talk about and just be in community, and it doesn't always have to be in a therapeutic space per se. But I wanted to give a shout out to Asian Mental Health Collective, AMHC. There's also Asians for Mental Health, and then Inclusive Therapist is also another great therapist directory. And there might be some other ones, but those are the ones that come to mind.
And even like the note about virtual spaces, like the explosion of virtual spaces in the past 5 years with us, being online more, national data is showing that Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders have increased their mental health utilization. Like they go to use mental health supports because there has been like the advent of but there is like telehealth available now, because like they are like there's more access to going. They may not need to go like further for like any transportation issues. There's just that maybe that even just like the privacy of like, oh, I don't have to go into someone's office and get found out that I'm going to therapy. And so just also that like the increase of telehealth as an opportunity for people to seek mental health.
There's so many resources out there now, which is way better than what we had in the past. And yeah, I agree with all of you that just that having the continuous conversations on mental health will help to destigmatize as well as helping individuals differentiate mental health versus mental illness to take away from that stigma of reaching out for help. I think that's a great way to approach it. And then since for Christina and Wing, since you guys work with direct practice, and Crystal, if you have any experience, feel free to answer as well. There's a phrase that says the personal is professional and vice versa. So what does that mean to you, especially working with clients? How does our personal, emotional, mental, and physical health affect the work that we do?
So personal is personal. So in social work school, my first semester, one of my classes and professors said that as a social worker, if I chose to go the clinic route, that I am my number one like best tool, right? Again, speaking to how we are all made up of like different parts that in the whole of who we are, I need to be really mindful, right, of how I'm showing up, right? And where am I speaking from, right? And that can be informed by my past experiences, right? My own mental health struggles, like growing up, my like ancestral trauma, right? Kind of showing up too. Like being really mindful of how that impacts my emotional, physical, mental, spiritual health, and how that might inform how I'm going to communicate with others, right? How I'm able to make decisions, right? And I like to think of, I like to ask myself, like, how safe and connected do I feel with myself relative to who I'm with or where I am? And when it comes to work, I've worked for places that were really harmful to my mental health personally, and that was also shared amongst like other coworkers of mine, right? And I wasn't able to fully deliver, right, the services that I wanted to offer optimally because I would go back to the office and experience kind of like harmful dynamics. And so again, like being aware of, okay, like what is activating me, right? Like what are my triggers and how can I work on that so that I can more, so that I can, again, so that I can show up with others in a more like helpful and like helpful way. So yeah, I don't think there's a separation, right, between personal, professional, and again, all the layers of our health and well-being.
I don't know if you all have seen the show Severance on Apple TV. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Yeah. Not to give any, I don't think it's a spoiler. Basically, the synopsis is the main character undergoes a procedure that basically allows, literally the idea of work-life separation. So you go into the work, you don't remember your personal life. You go home, you don't remember your work life. That doesn't exist, right? Yes, it doesn't exist yet. Who knows what they are. So, you know, personal is professional. It's basically talking about, I think, you know, in our society, we all like to talk about work-life balance. We all like to talk about how do we compartmentalize. I think we talk about it. We don't always do a very good job of being able to kind of implement and like actually practice that. I think from a more clinical perspective, or, you know, in terms of like being a therapist, you know, certainly I'll echo everything Wing is saying of like being able to provide like an emotionally safe place to be able to process things, but it's not always possible for you to completely compartmentalize, right? Like if you're dealing with some horrible grief or some sort of, you know, big stressor, the idea of like going into work and acting like everything was okay, sure. Can you do that? Absolutely. I'm sure we've all done it, but it starts to take a toll, right? It's very emotionally very exhausting, draining if you're expected to do that. You know, case in point, I was, you know, at the beginning of COVID during, you know, all the anti-Asian hate and sentiment, you know, I was in a workplace that I definitely deemed harmful. I don't think any of my peers were really checking in on me. I was the only person of color. And I had a white client ask me, how are you doing? And I started tearing up in front of this, you know, young white man, because he was the first person to ask me how I'm doing and not from my fellow psychologists. I felt so disrespected and so upset, but that's all to say, sometimes we can't keep the personal and professional separate. And obviously you want to find spaces where you can do that. But anyway, not to get too long-winded here, but I think the idea of healthy compartmentalization, yes, that is possible, but sometimes it's at a cost, right? So being able to find places to be able to process, to be able to talk about, you know, some of these things that are weighing heavily on you, because if not, you know, it will come out in inopportune times. It will come out maybe in other ways where it might not look good. So, you know, if you have people, spaces at work to be able to talk about it, great. I don't know if these ERG groups still exist. I don't know currently what's going on with the administration. I won't get political here, but I know at a lot of different corporations, organizations, agencies that I talk with the folks I work with, a lot of these ERGs are gone. So, finding spaces maybe outside of work to be able to process and talk about these things, because if not, it's gonna leak out. So I feel like especially in the workforce, there's just so much, comments about, really needing to keep work-life balance or work-life separate. Yes, to some extent, right? And I think, especially with more identities or marginalized identities, it makes it really difficult to be able to do that, especially if there are like racial microaggressions, or not even micro anymore. Sometimes it's just aggressions that happen, or aggressions towards other parts of your identity. So it is sometimes, very difficult to be able to keep that separate and finding spaces where you can show up genuinely, authentically yourself.
My answer is going to be, I think, different within the context of me working at an organization, an advocacy organization serving Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders. My partner jokes that his job is to make sure that my mental health is okay. And even me talking to him about the issues that are happening, I get the latest information on like what the rates of hate crimes are towards our communities, or somebody reaching out to us because of this content range to the death by suicide. It's like I've even had to have those boundaries with him of like what I can tell him, because for both of us and anybody that's identifies as being NHPI, we experience that what they call secondary trauma, because of the fact that you identify closely with maybe the trauma that this person is experiencing, you feel it. You can feel that pain more than somebody that may not identify. And so I've had to the question of how does it affect my mental health, it does. And that's why I have to double down on making sure I am checking in on myself and doing what I need to restore. One thing I'll mention, the importance of workplace culture, that values wellness. I'm so proud to be a part of an organization that before we do any of the work, it's us checking in on our mind, body, spirit. We do not do any work until we are just checking in, being honest with how we are feeling. And unfortunately, I don't see that as a standard practice of many workplaces, but really advocating for that, whether that is having that employee resource group that can be that safe space for talking about workplace issues, or that place outside of it. But yeah, I would say absolutely affects my work in particular, and just being mindful of that and attuned to that helps you be able to then do the work, because you and those that are around you that are building that culture know that you all are needing to take care of yourselves first before self-sacrificing before doing that advocacy. So, for an answer to that.
Thank you. And that actually, all of the points on checking in with yourself and work-life balance, that actually leads me to my next question. So sometimes it feels like, when work deadlines get busy, sometimes it feels like we have to sacrifice more in the name of our career and economic stability and things like that, like working longer hours or taking on more projects at work. So especially with me working and going to school, I definitely feel that. So how do we navigate this? What's some of your advice on that?
Don't do it. Don't hustle. Do that, right? And especially if the expectations are on you, maybe from your supervisors, from your workplace to produce. I feel like I'm not the person to ask, because I for my staff, I make sure that we honor our well-being and give grace to the pace. That's it. I've had to learn the hard way, the toll it takes on my body. I've had people that, particularly women that are high achievers, similar to me, eldest daughters that have had to make their way as BIPOC women to do. They're now much older than me, saying that their bodies have taken such a hard toll on them and they can't do what they were able to do. And, they're being seen as, they're being kind of only seen for their achievements, only seen for their productivity. And so I guess I feel like I'm not the person to ask for this. Mine is just to really honor your wellness, your mental health and well-being, and find a workplace that honors it as well. And also know the systems that we're in that may push up against that, and whether that's school, academia, whether that's you know, like it says here, like taking like places that like award you for that achievement. I guess the question for me is like, what do you value? And maybe it is like being your own boss. Maybe it is, you know, finding other ways to like have that career for yourself in order for you to like also value your well-being. I was kind of going all over the place, but I guess I'm just happy to not be in that kind of situation because I learned in previous workplaces that like I couldn't be the token that was taking on too much. I couldn't be the person that felt like no one else is speaking about like racial justice, so I have to be the one to do it. No one's talking about XYZ. That was constantly me for like in my career. And so it wasn't until I was on a team that valued our well-being that I felt like, oh, I can actually sustain myself and I feel safe to stay. But still just
I like Crystal's answer of don't, and I also know
Yes,
how
please.
difficult that is. When I think back to when I was an undergrad and then my various grad programs, I mean, it took me a while, even after I graduated, even after I got my degree and gotten my license, like not to always be saying yes to everything. I still, I mean, I said yes to this thing. I still do it. And, you know, I think trying to be more intentional about like, what value or what purpose does XYZ activity or task, like, and not to make it transactional, but how does it serve me? Obviously, I said yes to this event because it's important for me to be able to talk with, you know, folks in the Asian community talking about mental health. That's important to me. But there are other events that I've been asked to give talks at, say, law firms where I'm like, does that really serve me? Probably not. But I want to be acknowledging of the fact that I think when I was younger, when you're in student sort of status, it is harder. You know, there is a power differential when a professor or your manager supervisors ask. It is very, very difficult. I also want to, you know, add on to that in terms of power differential. Like if you have, let's say, an older male, white male supervisor, and you're a BIPOC woman, right? Like there are these big sort of like power dynamics there. So it definitely is very difficult. If you're able to be in spaces like the organization that Crystal's talking about, like how lovely is that? But of course, that's just not reality, right? That you're going to be in spaces where you might feel like you're being exploited a little bit, or where you're being undervalued, not appreciated. So certainly knowing your worth, trying to find folks that you can maybe talk to or try to get support. You know, I'm just trying to be realistic here. I don't want to be pessimistic, but that is just the nature of the game. I want to also talk about a couple more things too that I've really thought about. The idea of imposter syndrome, right? I think we've heard this term so much. I think it's actually problematic, right? Initially, I'm like, yes, imposter syndrome. Yes, we all have it. No, imposter syndrome, it's so problematic because, you know, when you're in a system where, you know, those who are most privileged, let's just be real, it's like white men, for example, when you have a very differing identity, right? You know, in these systems, you feel like you're failing when it's not really based around, you know, how you can succeed. So I really want to just throw that out there. I have an issue with imposter syndrome. I know the idea is like, oh, we all feel like we're struggling. Yes, there is truth to that. And I think when we really sort of uphold the idea of imposter syndrome, actually, I think that's really problematic. So I know this is probably maybe my own pet peeve here, but I just want to really acknowledge that there's a lot of factors that go into why it might be so difficult for, say, you know, some of you all who, you know, with age, race, gender, you know, things like that, why it might be so much harder to say no to things. And going back to Crystal's comment, say no if it's not going to be, you know, useful or valuable to you, and knowing that it is really difficult. But sometimes we have to maybe take some risks if we don't want to end up feeling like we're being exploited or taken advantage of. Once again, knowing how difficult it is, you know, depending on kind of where you fall on the totem pole. Okay, that feels very pessimistic, so I'm hoping you have a more uplifting response.
I mean, I think it's just like real, you know, keeping it real. And so I'm thinking about who's here, right? And y'all are leaders in your own ways. and you're continuing to grow as leaders, right, in the public service realm. And I imagine that there's a reason why you're saying yes to this path that you're on, right? Like you wouldn't be sitting in this room, spending time with us, right? When you could be doing anything else if you didn't care about the path that you're on, right? And part of what I think about when I see and witness and like experience like leaders in the making, especially those who have like intersectional marginalized identities, is that we are all part of this era of like breaking cycles, right? We're breaking generational cycles, we're breaking historical cycles of harm and violence, right? That's actively occurring right now. And so this question around sacrificing ourselves, right, for work, yes, don't do it. To Crystal's point, like, where does that come from, right? That comes from, that's a very colonial, like, idea, right? Time and work and productivity, like 8-hour workday, right? And this is going to be kind of cliche, but we're human beings, right? We're not human doings. And so something I invite you all to consider is when you're feeling like overwhelmed and that there's just so much building on your to-do list or your plate, right? Take a moment of pause. Right? Yes, you do not have to say yes to everything. You're allowed to say no. Right? And because saying yes and no to certain things, yeah, absolutely cost you in the long run, right? In the short term and in the long term, right? Your well-being and your health. I'm advocating to be a priority in your lives, right? Especially as you're continuing to grow and like explore these different areas of your lives, especially your professional lives. Is to acknowledge that being a leader means choosing to not continue to repeat patterns of harm, right? And that means breaking cycles of like burning out, right? Of self-sacrificing, right? Of these things that maybe even our immigrant parents imparted onto us, right? Because they had to literally survive, war and, immigration and, being refugees and building like from little to nothing, right? And while there might be parallels to what we're witnessing now in our lives, we're also in a place of choosing different ways of doing things, right? And different ways of being. So, please don't do it.
Choose yourself.
Yeah, these are some of them.
Thank you. Yeah, you shared some great tips that actually answered my next question on like what are some things we can do to prevent burnout. As you mentioned, Crystal, just don't take on the extra workload, or Wing, you said take a break and just pause, give yourself like a little short break. So I do want to quickly jump to the next question. So we are currently in an era of like information overload, where students and like young professionals who are maybe in fields of public health or policy, things like that, they're really plugged into current events from like a variety of social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, and we're constantly being bombarded with news. So how do you recommend our audience remain politically informed while taking care of themselves?
I think the same way you are mindful of, your eating, your exercise habits, your sleeping habits, your consumption, right? Being mindful of the ways in which you consume media. Like, for me, I am not someone that doom scrolls because I know what it does. Instead, I am mindful and attuned to how, like, the spaces where I feel like I can get helpful information, and how often I want to do it. Because if I'm looking at my Instagram, or if I'm maybe having that notifications on for messages all the time, then it becomes out of my control, right? I'm getting the alerts, I'm getting the, the feed. And so I've had to just train myself to be mindful of just my consumption. I think in terms of like ways you can still be informed, in the same way we are, recommending support groups and therapy for mental health support, I would also encourage, like, what are the spaces that are helpful for you to really kind of digest this political knowledge that you're getting? Like, your political wellness is also an aspect of wellness. And so for me, what that looks like is every Sunday, like, I'm gonna shout out Angel and Olivia right now. They are part of a program with me called the Filipino Young Leaders Program. And every Sunday since COVID, we talk about, like, what's the misinformation that our Filipino communities are experiencing, and how do we create more factual narratives that can then go out to our community. And that space every Sunday has been a space for me to be like, okay, I'm seeing all this news, I'm gonna wait to Sunday to be able to, like, digest this with and process with a group of people. And so just encouraging you to find what those spaces look like for you. If it's a live, like, group of people, whether it's like a podcast, whether it's, like, you just even writing down, like, what's the information I want to know about or want to keep track of. And also, yes, if you are on Instagram, just being mindful of, like, things that your algorithm are feeding you, and just knowing when to take a break from that. I think that's my, like, simple initial answer. But yeah, just again, it first starts with just being aware and tuned to what your current intake is. And it's okay to turn away, and it's okay to tune in. And I feel like I'm the advocacy person on here. So, like, using that, like, also your advocacy, your voice, to be able to feel like there's change that you're making by either educating someone, doing direct actions, advocating in your own way, also helps you feel less powerless, helps you, like, gain hope and feel like you're connected with other people fighting for the cause that you care about.
I appreciate that. So something I'm hearing, right, is to know your limit, right? And we each are going to have different limitations around how much we consume and how much we are able to turn off, right? And that can be due to various reasons. And I love that you have this, like, weekly kind of ritual and, like, space and folks who are aligned, right? It sounds like to really have that to, like, process together and to feel, yeah, well. And I think about how it's almost like necessary, right, to stay tuned in to some capacity currently, especially with, like, the political landscape and happening all over the world. And yeah, I've also found it to be really helpful to take what I consume, right, and have an action behind that, for sure. And that can look like so many different. That can be in so many different ways, right? For me, I am involved in a DC-based healing mutual aid organization, and being able to contribute to, like, local active organizing work feels, like, impactful for me, right? And so I think something to ask yourselves is, okay, what can I do with this information that's going to feel like I'm able to have a sense of release, right? Because we're not meant to, like, store it all inside, right? What ways can I express and release this information as well? Something that myself and my community have also started to do more of is create, right? Think now, like, past historical events of massive uprisings, right, and great political change, art is one of the crucial aspects that we can all contribute, I believe, right, during these times. You can write, you can create collages, right? I've seen so many cool like community workshops pop up where people are also helping like mend clothing and just, you know, gather to create, right? How can that be one way to also voice and process like all that's happening, right? And all that, again, we're
Thank you. Thanks for all of that advice. I know I have a problem with doom scrolling and like I'm constantly stressing out myself out with all of the politics stuff. But thanks for all of the insightful discussion, and we had such a full discussion, so informative. The last thing I want to ask is, what's one thing that you hope the audience can take away from all of our discussion today?
Started. I heard of this quote a while back when I was like at a mental health organization. It was like, when I become weak, even illness becomes wellness. And so like really the importance of leaning into community care at this time. In Filipino culture, there's this word CAPAL, like the shared self. We're all interconnected, right? And when I think about that, it makes me feel so powerful, so much hope. And so in the same way that, 11 years ago, someone was sitting here and was able to just share with me all the information she knew about how to get into a career in mental health, I just want to offer that to you all as well. Like, I am not me without you. And what I know, like, I hope that, it's meant to be shared. So even beyond today's panel, like, feel free to reach out. I hope I'm not like extending, but to any of us, because we need ourselves more than ever, like in our collective just wisdom. And so, yeah, just hoping that we lean into this community care during this. I was gonna say something.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think Crystal, that was beautiful. I mean, I think during this time, even if we're around a lot of people, we can feel really lonely. So I would just, highlight, underscore just the importance of community, that finding, I know it's so cheesy to say your people, but finding people you feel safe with. By all means, if you have like mentors or people you feel comfortable with, like at your organizations, reaching out, talking to them. Yes, I'm more than happy if any of you have any questions, you want to reach out. I think just finding folks in your organizations or outside of your organizations to be able to talk, just so it doesn't feel so lonely. Because I think a lot of us, even when we know we have like supports and networks, it can still feel like a really just scary and lonely time. So.
I'm going to leave you all with a question around how you can practice, play, and joy in your lives this week. I think that's so important, especially as adults, to create time for play and experience joy.
Thank you. I will definitely be taking things away from this discussion as well, especially focusing on that self-care and going home right after this. So I will turn it back to Hannah so we can move on to the survey.
So before we go to the audience Q&A, we'll be handing out audience surveys to everyone in this room. For those of you that are in the Zoom meeting, we'll be dropping it in the chat box below. And as y'all are filling out the survey, Angela, I think if there's any questions from our virtual attendees first, maybe we can go ahead and get started with answering those questions before we hand it over to our in-person attendees.
Yeah. You want me to do it now or give them time for the survey? Okay. Sounds good. So we do have one question from the virtual room. Francis from Ramirez, he is in the same program as I am, actually. He's currently majoring in social work, but he feels as though, or they feel as though there isn't much experience or representation in Asian or Asian American communities within that education. So what are some of your advice on how they can explore cultural-based care when it's perceived differently by the professors or the curriculum?
Yes, as a social worker, this panel on by sharing that I felt really fortunate that I was able to be connected to and like integrated in the New Orleans like Vietnamese community while I was studying in grad school there. And through that experience, I felt like I had sufficient, culturally relatable and like appropriate resources that I was able to tune into. And so something I would encourage, right, is to maybe connect with student groups who might be aligned, right? Maybe like PI orgs within the school, maybe within the community, right? Maybe seeking whether it's community-based, faith-based groups that might have a bit more of a like racial, like ethnic diverse community to join. Because within my social work cohort, I was one of two Asian identifying people, and it felt really isolating at times, and really jarring, right? Especially as we were talking about like social racial justice issues and equity, right, and privilege. So yeah, I think being able to look beyond the school itself and try to tap into those other groups would be one way.
Thank you. And Francis, I hope that answers your question. And that was the only one.
So back there. We'll just kind of shout out. Yeah. Those are great questions. Thank you. What was your name? Philip. Thanks, Philip.
Just to make sure, so the first question is you're asking, how do you talk about some of these like family traumas? Because it sounds like you want to hear more about your family story and the experiences while acknowledging that it might be traumatic for the older relatives to talk about. And the second question, I think, was talking about how do you navigate sort of this conflict around, or maybe some of the feelings you have of that pressure of needing to do well because of the sacrifices of your family's expectations, yeah. I'll take a go at the two questions. I've had, I've had some folks, actually bring up, both things that you're bringing up. One of like, I want to know more about my family history, my family background, but the elders or parents don't want to talk about it because it is so, it's really just emotionally really threatening. It's really scary to open up. From a more just like logistical, rational perspective, I think what some folks have done is like, maybe like ask gentler questions to see if they'll maybe share more. So like, what was your childhood like and let's just say like in Vietnam or in the Philippines, what was your childhood like? What did you like to do? Maybe start off with some soft questions and sort of see, where they're willing to go. Obviously that's such a tough tension because I'm sure you have a lot of curiosity and also at the same time, it sounds like you're wanting to respect maybe some of the boundaries that they're setting. It also makes me wonder if, like, I don't know if you have maybe older cousins or other family members who might have some information. I know that's not firsthand, but is there other ways for you to maybe get some more information? Or, have you ever heard of like the storybook?
I have.
Yeah, there's something called like the storybook where they might now come in different languages, I believe, but it's like these different prompts. And if your family member's willing to, they can write like a paragraph of however much they want per each prompt. So, it can start off with some light questions like, what was your favorite childhood memory or favorite childhood toy or game? And then it can kind of lead into some of these more emotionally deep questions. So there's maybe some different ways to go about trying to see if you can get more information, but I understand that that would be really hard if they're not maybe willing to really tap into that. I think to the second thing, oh gosh, that's struggle that, I mean, I think so many of us, myself included, I don't have an answer for you. It's sort of making and holding space for both that, I certainly respect and appreciate all the sacrifices that my, parents have given. Also at the same time, I didn't ask for them. I didn't ask for those expectations or those pressures. So I think sometimes I find myself, and I think the folks I work with oscillating between wanting to be selfless versus selfish. And I don't even know if that's the right term to use, but in what moments do you prioritize your needs versus in what moments do you maybe kind of focus a little bit more on what your family is wanting? But it's such a tough dilemma. And I maybe the two of you have a better answer, but I just want to acknowledge, I think that's sort of a experience that so many, and I'm sure it's beyond just like the NHPI community, but I think just this idea of like, how do you cope with sort of the sacrifices that the older generations have given, and how much of that, weighs on you, and how much do you sacrifice or prioritize, for them?
I want to touch on the first question. Just for the story of a personal story of mine. I'm not a clinician. I just want to say that this is more of just like what's worked for me. So my family is from Bataan, Philippines. It's often most well known for just like World War II and this march where they killed many folks in the Philippines, the Bataan Death March. And so I know for a fact my family, because we lived there, have been heavily impacted by it, but they don't talk about it enough. And for the longest time, just talking about mental health, my parents didn't want to talk about it. And so I guess the question I had to ask myself is like, what are the ways that we could just normalize talking about how we're feeling today? And also, when I started working in this field, what are the ways that I can bring them out to like community events or watch a movie that's like talking about like the Asian American identity, like family experiences, and since they like watching movies or since they like going to community events, like what are the ways I could just expose them to like just mental health education? so that they can also start to have their own mental health literacy and talk, just have conversations with me about maybe how they're feeling, or like my, down the line, my dad would ask like, oh, your sibling, they seem very down, like that would not have been in his language, like unless like these activities were like brought into our family. And it's still a touchy subject with war and the impact of colonization. And so I've had to just tell for myself, like, if I will it, if I manifest that I'm going to like eventually learn about this history, like it may not come from them, and accepting that for myself. And soon enough, like I started meeting other people that had family that came from the Philippines, and they started like telling me their family histories, or I guess I just believed it, that I would find it. I found Filipino American history courses, and that was my way of coping with like that kind of like loss and grief of like me not knowing, if that makes sense. And so I guess my hope for you is like, yeah, just continue to will it that you will like learn, even if it's not directly from your parents or your family. There are just a lot more people, I think, in the diaspora that are like yearning that for themselves, that history. And I feel like there are going to be people, maybe like your peers, or maybe like books or movies that come out that can help you like kind of piece it together for yourself. So I hope that helps me. But.
Generation that from this one here and here with my daughter. And I've heard that, I've heard people in my generation comment on how the younger generation aren't as hardworking, are more fragile. I've heard like Amy Poehler comment and Tina Fey and Amy Poehler's tour that, are you from Gen Z? Did your stomach hurt? Are you anxious? You know, so like, what would you say? I have mixed feelings about that. I think it's been really tough for this generation, for Gen Z, millennials, to grow up in this very violent. I think just really hard mentally. And so what would you say, how would you comment, or how would you reply to someone who would say something?
Well, this is a bit more of like a intellectual, like scientific, biological response. But I would encourage them to look up epigenetics, which is the study of our DNA and how it shows the fact that we carry trauma from past generations in our DNA. They've done studies that show, especially early in life experiences, if even in utero, the child is in utero, they can carry what the mother is carrying, and that it takes about 7 generations to heal trauma is part of that research. So for those who are more like science focused, yeah, that's what I would encourage.
Okay, I'm speaking as an elder millennial here. You know, I see, you know, I work with boomers and Gen Xers, millennials and Gen Zs, and I see how all the different, you know, generations have made different profiles. I don't know if that's the right words to use. You know, something I would really give credit to the Gen Zers and it's Gen Alpha now. I am very, dare I say, like jealous or envious of the fact that they are much more able to and comfortable with expressing the things that they don't want or what they need, asking for mental health days. Like, I think certainly maybe in your generation, certainly I think for me, I was never something that I would ever think to ask. So I will give a lot of credit to, I think, for the younger generation, they're more vocal, and I think they can assert and advocate for themselves, which I think for some of the older generations, because they didn't have that opportunity. I don't know if it's an envy thing of like, we need to have more resiliency and we can't ask for that. I'm sure there's sort of an in-between too of like being able to assert yourself, but also having some resiliency. And I'm also just thinking about for the Gen Zers, I mean, COVID took what, 3 years of like some very like formative years. And I'm imagining if I was in high school or college and I, had to be virtual for some of those years, that's a very big impact. So I also want to be acknowledging of the socio like cultural experiences that might impact some of the way that the Gen Z generation may be operating a little bit differently. So, I want to give a very clear answer in that I think there's some elements that I think with their, with resiliency and with the socio-cultural sort of events of what's happened, I think there is some impact of that, but I have to really give them a lot of kudos about just being more assertive and advocating for what they need. So I'm sure the boomers will have comments about millennials and Gen Zers will have comments about the Xers and boomers. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but certainly I think that there's a lot of factors to that.
I have nothing to add to that. Like, I full agreement.
The fan is very loud. Can you project a little bit more?
You talked a little bit about the public servant experience. We're all kind of in the same sector, more or less. But like when you go to work and you go through every day, then become that things that maybe emotionally draining, but you still feel passionate about that work and you just want to keep doing it. How do you kind of sustain yourself even though you're kind of like fighting against the wind and it's supposed to be like other people in the community are supposed to be shield if you're like fighting with KPI, you're working to remediate that. But still emotionally draining on you because you are how do you recommend that you I feel like friends to stay in the fight is kind of antithetical to what you guys were talking about earlier. Keep going,
What I will say is I used to like joke that I never burned out. And the reason I said that was because I felt like I always had compassion. And when I thought about the two, when I think of burnout, I think, oh, you just fizzled out. You're like done. You can't like operate anymore. Versus compassion fatigue, what I visualize that as like, I'm never going to stop because I love my community so much. I know I'm doing a good thing. And so I just never physically allowed myself to stop. I think that for me was so detrimental to my health and having to just understand that really you can't sustain that like for long. Like me now in my 30s, like my health, like the moment I know I'm doing too much, like my body is telling me. And so, yeah, I probably was able to like keep going like earlier than that, but really truly knowing like, how do I lean on things outside of myself to keep this movement going? Like change doesn't happen in a moment, it happens in a movement and it happens with like, yes, you, but others around you. And so tapping in, tapping out when you need to, and just letting others know, like that's how it's fight. That's my biggest advice. Like we have to stop like thinking that like we have to self-sacrifice ourselves. Like the folks, I know a lot of like activists that are older than me that are telling me like, you need to, like, they've told me like, if you're getting headaches, if you're like glorifying, like you're taking all-nighters, like we need you, like, please take care of yourself. And so yeah, I guess just the advice that we just bringing home is like, just doing that and also knowing, like being honest with others around you, around what that load looks like, so that they can carry it.
I would echo that exactly. I mean, I think the idea of sustainability, right? As much as you feel very passionate and maybe you are experiencing pressure from others to keep going, it's not sustainable for you to be continuing to go. You are going to burn out. And although burnout is not a diagnosis for a specific separate like psychiatric diagnosis, burnout can lead to depression. We do not want that. You know, rest is just as important, if not sometimes more important than the actual like action itself. So I think hopefully you have thoughtful, compassionate people around you who will tell you, hey, you know, take a break or tap out, you know, someone else will step in or other people can come in. Like it's all about community and all about, you know, communicating. So just echoing everything that you're saying, that in order to be sustainable or in order to sustain this, you have to, you know, really be kind and gracious with yourself and give yourself moments to take a break and rest. Resting does not mean you're stopping. Actually, rest is so important for the movement itself. And once the thing we said again, community, you gotta find the people that you can rely on, that you can scream with and cry or whatever it is, but finding, you know, that safe spaces to be able to commiserate in this. The last thing I'll just echo, you were talking about secondary or vicarious traumatization, right? That even if you're not experiencing it, if you're around it all the time, I know for us, you know, we experience it all the time with the compassion fatigue too. It's not sustainable. It's not healthy. So please, you know, check in with yourselves. If you're physically, emotionally, you know, starting to withdraw, you're starting to, you know, lack of motivation, you're procrastinating. Like these are all signs of physically also like fatigue and stomach aches and like not being able to focus. Like all of these are signs you're burning out. So we want to make sure that you're not burning out or even, you know, becoming depressed. So please check in with yourselves and lean on community, take rest, find joy.
So when it comes to like workplace wellness, like building that workplace culture, like as a leader, what does that look like for you to advocate for like positive mental health in the workplace, and what does it look like to advocate from like the staff? Did I capture that right? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm
It's a big question because I'll say from the staff side, like maybe my early career, like how to advocate. I think you're one of your like strongest relationships. I in my opinion, you make in your career, like in your workplace, is with your supervisor. And so, really, honoring the time you have with your supervisor and being honest about like what your needs are, what your like. If you are constantly saying yes, for example, and going against maybe like your needs, that can be detrimental to your health. That can be detrimental to like even just how you perceive work. And so having a relationship with your supervisor where you're advocating for your needs, whether it is like your workload, whether it is like, you know, the things that you do outside of work, taking time off, even acknowledging new policies in the workplace that may cause you to work overtime, like really setting those, like being mindful of what may be causing you to the burnout or potentially burnout. I think having a relationship with your supervisor where it's like very honest and transparent is so crucial. I don't know at the systemic level how a staff member can really push for that, but in my day, we've pushed for like having support groups and employee resource groups created, or pushing for like different events that like honored our wellness. Those were types of things that we were able to do, or I was able to do, or people that I knew were able to do at that level. With leadership, there's a lot of power within leadership to like shape the culture as well. And again, that whole idea of like you're a human being, not a human doing. Like having a culture that prioritize people over productivity is so crucial. Like I said at NAPIMA, we start with our body, mind, spirit check-ins. We have like flex time off, and we're moving towards like a 4-day work week. Not to say those are like automatic like ways that we're focusing on wellness, but just constantly being mindful of the person first, and maybe policies that can help not overload someone. We're thinking of like meeting 3 weeks. So like instead of like having a week full of meetings back to back to back, it's just a week where people can like clean up their Google Drive or like do what they need to do for themselves to do the work on their own. And I think a big thing that a lot of organizations do is just like find those activities that bring together connection and joy. And so we're virtual at NAPIMA, we're all national, but we have a thing called Gather Town. I don't know if folks know what it is, but it's like a virtual office where we like look like Pokemon characters and are like in a virtual office to meet each other and just like chat over like the water cooler, the virtual water cooler, because it's so isolating to just log on to a Zoom, log off, and then you're like working alone the whole day. And I think even those tiny things of like just having places where people can have a third space of work that isn't focused on the work they're doing can help with just building that community, building that culture that may not be available unless they were in person. There are I think this is a lot of different ideas in terms of workplace culture, but those are the things that have worked with us.
Lovely.
Yeah, our fellows are always there. It's summer. I was like, I'm gonna be on there more.
I think speaking to like how to be an effective leader around advocating for mental health in the workplace is beginning to like maybe reimagine and like redefine what being a leader means, right? That it doesn't mean being like aggressive and focused, yes, so strongly on like productivity. How can it look like being compassionate and caring, right? How can it be showing up with empathy and actually caring to listen about what your colleagues need, right? Rather than assuming what they might need or not, or overlooking, right? Or minimizing what they might need, because everyone's going to show up with different capacities, right? With different places of knowledge. And yeah, like I think like for me, looking back in retrospect at workplaces that I've been in, I wish I knew myself how like neurodivergent I am, and that means I have like different sets of needs, right? Like I can't sit at a desk for like hours on time, right? Like I need time for breaks and things. And so I think just being really mindful about those differences and abilities that people have, and also again showing up with that level of compassion, care in listening, and also in just being an advocate alongside and trying to challenge what hierarchies and like power dynamics might be set up to do, right? And trying to meet people, where they really need to be. Love Island right now. My partner like jokes that I have so much sugar trapped and like I just watch reality. It does, yeah, that restores me. For the dessert. You know, it's great.
Not saying Love Island, should I?
Yeah.
For me, with just all the tragedies and just horrors going on, I mean, there's some really great shows like Severance. Please watch it if you haven't. It's a great show. But right now I've only been able to watch comedies because I need something uplifting. I see anywhere from 4 to 6 like clients a day, and then I also supervise students and teach. I need something uplifting after I'm just talking about trauma, whether it's intergenerational trauma, racial trauma. I just need something sometimes real, whether it's real reality TV or just like there's some lovely sitcoms like Shrinking, another Apple TV show. For me, I need something to unwind, but not like mindless. So I really am not I know we're all guilty of doing the mindless scrolling, but I try not to do that. So something that's lighthearted, something that I can be engaged with. But I just can't take on like the heavy, like Handmaid's Tale thing right now. So for me, I do love true crime, but right now we're living through it. So I need something just lighthearted, but not something that's so mindless. Because if you're just scrolling while you're watching, that defeats the purpose. And then if you have pets or you like to garden, something like that.
I love that too. Being outside. I don't love how guilty and pleasure go together because I don't feel guilty about what brings me pleasure, right? So what brings me pleasure is putting my phone down and going outside for a walk. That's been my go-to lately or laying on the floor. I feel like that. Yes, I sometimes lay on my carpeted floor and just there. So really trying to get as close to the earth as possible for me. Grounding, yeah, for me brings me a lot of replenishment and replenishment.
Yeah. There's so much that's outside of our control. Like, I think speaking of grounding strategies, like what is that one small thing that you have control over? Maybe it's eating that cookie or, playing a video game or watching Love Island or whatever it is.
Every day at 7.
No, but there's so much that's unpredictable. There's so much outside of our control, but like really being able to identify what is that 1 or 2 small things that you have control that will bring you joy.
I think that's a nice place to leave it. Let us thank this incredible panel. Thank you to Angela. Thank you to Crystal. Thank you to Dr. Christina. Thank you, Wing. Thank you all, audience, for being here tonight. I think in a city that too often really emphasizes the hustle, I think it was refreshing to hear, let us pause, let us brace the pace, and let us find space. And particularly in a time where a lot of workplaces and a lot of places are moving away from creating that space, we hope that CAPAL can be that space. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you to our panelists. Tonight was very much about learning, right? And I think there's just so much wisdom that came from our panelists tonight. It's also an opportunity for us to showcase like tremendous professionals, tremendous humans. So thank you very much again. And I think we'll take you up on an offer to follow up with you, whether you approach them tonight, or I think Hannah would be happy to connect everybody. And thank you to Hannah for finding such an incredible panel. Thank you, Hannah. If you enjoyed tonight's event, I want to ask everyone a favor. We have 2 more of these. The next one's on July 10th. That information's on our website. But invite a friend, bring a pal, bring a coworker. We'd love to, just share, I think, the knowledge and wisdom of our tremendous, whether it's alums that came back to us, Crystal, and professionals in our network, with our community here in the DMV and for everyone who joined us online as well. Thank you to Moapia. Thank you to our hosts here at WEC. And thank you again to you all. Let's be mindful. Let's take care of each other. Let's take care of ourselves, and we'll see you at a future CAPAL program. Thanks, everybody. Did we freeze you out? Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's a good note. We have a program here to get a free blanket. Yes, you know.